Welcome to the Golden Feather. Grab a pint, a plate, and pick your seats. Your hosts, Vertek and Chibi Bree, are back from their latest adventure.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Golden Feather. Today is the Friday the 13th of January, 2023. We are on episode 151. We've called this one Frighteningly Fun because of the, Friday the 13th. Why not, right?
Why not?
We have a friend returning to us here, Farazan, aka Farazan Gaming. How are you today?
I'm doing very well, actually. It's good to be back.
Glad to have you back. Been a while.
Yeah,
it has been a minute. Maybe two.
Maybe two.
Maybe two.
I was definitely trying to get some of you on who we had back, I think, when we first started in 2019. And maybe early 2020. I was trying to get some of you on like last year at the end of it and it ended up being the beginning of this year. And I was like, well, we're getting close to the, fourth or fifth year mark at this point.
Yeah.
So
strong.
Yeah, still going strong. Welcome in, Zikai. Zikai? I don't know how you say that name. I'm trying.
Zikai. That's how I'm going to pronounce it. It sounds fun. And as always, the lovely and talented and branch-lured Chibi here next to my side. And how are you?
I'm doing pretty well. Thank you for asking. How about yourself?
Oh, dandy. Just dandy. It's been a fantastic day. It is Friday. I love Fridays because the weekend's coming up and I get to spend some time with lovely people here.
Speaking of the weekend. Go ahead.
Welcome everybody in, by the way. And thanks for stopping by.
Welcome to the Tavern. Welcome to the Golden Feather. Speaking of the weekend, this weekend will be the first weekend that I'll be doing it, but tomorrow morning around 10 a.m. or 11 a.m. Eastern time, depends on what time I get up and get everything sorted, get the tavern ready and open, I'll be doing something called Coffee Quest, and I'm actually working with Vertek. We're trying to get to level 80 because Old War is about to drop on Classic. So we'll probably be trying to push through some level 80 content, and I'll probably be doing a lot of PvP. Yes, you heard it here, folks. I will be doing PvP. The person who does not like PvP.
Oh, that'll be fun.
But I have come to find that I like organized PvP much more than just out in the world random PvP, because I'm usually not ready for it then, and I'm not in the mood for it. So I'm just like, leave me alone. I'm just trying to kill something. But then on Sunday, I'll be doing session 0 just to kind of get you guys all prepared for what will be happening. But I'll be starting to run D&D campaigns on Sundays for most Sundays. And when I'm not running a campaign, you will be alerted by that. Have a nice little infographic out for you guys. And then Monday, we finish off the weekend rounding. We're doing Friday through Monday now, so it's going interestingly. But Mondays we'll be doing a Tavern talk. So come stop by, chat with us. Literally, talking about anything. It could be Ashes related or not Ashes related. Just chatting, really. Tavern talks. So yeah.
As long as it's fun and engaging.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm sure we'll have some rules about that we'll tell you more about on Monday, but I just wanted to remind you guys at the beginning, and Farazan here has been playing lots of video games since we last chatted. So what have you been kind of gravitating towards?
So most recently finishing Horizon Forbidden West and God of War Ragnarok for single player stuff. Those are both very good. And then on the multiplayer side, I'm not doing Classic, but I am doing the Dragonflight expansion. My guild's currently doing Mythic. We're 2 out of 8.
Nice.
So that's going well. I'm a big fan. And then the rest of it's just been a lot of like small indie games and just other like smaller games over the last like probably 2 months. But the bulk of my time has definitely gone into God of War and Horizon. Obviously aside from WoW, which always sucks up so much time.
Yeah. I feel that.
Yeah. It's almost like another job sometimes, feels like, yeah?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, at least initially during the start of an expansion, whenever everybody's like gearing up and getting used to everything. But it's starting to kind of level back out. So I'll be able to put some more time into some other things that are on the horizon.
So,
Nice.
what are on the horizon?
Well, that's actually a good question. There's a bunch of... Oh, go ahead.
You said it a few moments ago. It's Zero Dawn is on the horizon. It's like right at the end of it.
Which is both a terrible joke and also true, because one of the things I'm kind of looking forward to is the PlayStation 5 releasing their VR, because there's the Horizon game that they're making specifically for the VR.
PS VR 2, I think is what it is now.
Yeah. So Horizon is on the horizon and also on the horizon in the future. So I mean, definitely looking forward to like anything like that. I'm a big RPG guy in general, but obviously with really being into Ashes and MMOs kind of being like the thing that I look for the most, there are some things that are kind of on the roadmap. I don't know when they're necessarily going to come out. There's some things like Blue Protocol that are on the roadmap for this year, and Throne and Liberty. Throne and Liberty is probably the one that I'm the most interested to see, because I think that's the one that is going to launch before Ashes that is the most like Ashes.
Yeah. I know that our guild is looking at Throne and Liberty as well. Sir Unsington has a question. I'm going to direct this towards you because we can explain as to why we're playing WoW. But for you folks who are into WoW, would Persistent Alpha 2 destroy your WoW schedule initially, forever, or not at all?
Maybe initially. The thing about the Persistent Alpha 2 is it's still going to be an alpha. So you're still... You're still primarily testing systems, so it's probably going to come in waves. So when it first drops, they're going to have whatever that initial set of content is, and that'll probably be a decent amount over what we saw in Alpha 1. Mm-hmm. So that'll take me a while to get through, because I'll be going through whatever classes are initially there. Mm-hmm. And then there'll probably be some like additional things like raid testing, or when they get into doing the subclasses, because remember, they're doing the archetypes first. Mm-hmm. So you're only going to have the 8 to start with. So at some point during that Persistent Alpha 2, they'll add in those the second part of it. Exactly. And so it'll probably come and go. But yeah, definitely initially I'm going to get in there and provide as much feedback as I possibly can on all the things, because it's just kind of how I am. But yeah, at the same time, it's not going to be the whole game. So it's not, there's not going to be an infinite number of things that you can do during it. Yeah,
fair. We joined up with World of Warcraft because our guild is playing it. So for lack of anything else to play with our guild, we got suckered into it, but also it seems like a good time to kind of get to know our guild mates a little bit better, the ones that are more into the raidy scene. And we definitely have some that are super into PvP as well. There's been a few times where Vertec and I got ganked by somebody and they're like, what? Where? I'll be right there. Give me a second.
Yep.
So definitely has changed our experience with World of Warcraft, for sure, and it makes us more excited, I think, to play with the guild and see what that would feel like with Ashes, knowing that World of Warcraft's open world PvP system is not ideal in the least.
Definitely not.
So yeah,
just saying, everybody look out. Nexus has some bloodthirsty people. They're fair. They won't really, curb stomp you if you're super low leveled or anything, but don't don't do bad things to Nexus people, because everybody comes running very fast and eagerly. Don't even need a summon.
Yeah.
Just, oh man, I just got killed by like two Alliance out here. What? Where? I'm already logging over.
Yeah. They were preparing to do a raid, and the raid leader was getting annoyed because nobody was over like helping summon people, because they're all over by us taking out people that like ganked us. So plus in WoW people can fly, so swoop down, gank, fly away is something that can happen. Yeah, exactly, there's that too. Plus there's the corruption system that is not in WoW, where if I'm just minding my own business trying to turn in a quest and somebody wants to come up and gank me without any reason for me to attack back, they can just keep doing that over and over, unlike in Ashes. So it's been a nice reminder of what World of Warcraft is like, and then also looking at what Ashes is going to be like and having a more recent perspective on it. So I've been enjoying that. Another question we have is from Solvrin. Hello, Solvrin. Welcome in. Also, welcome in Mezera and Windwiller, who just joined into the tavern. But what archetype? Sorry.
I was gonna say really quick, from our point of view in Nexus, also, I think it's not really gonna hurt us much.
Yeah.
Yeah, we gotta take our turn.
We're kind of Ashes first, right?
Yeah, we're gonna. I'm pretty sure most of our guild is gonna end up being prioritizing some Ashes, but I don't think it's gonna really hurt raid times, because like Farazan was saying, like you jump into a raid for a couple hours, you beat some stuff down, and then all there is raid prep that can be done at any time. So
especially when you're max level already.
Yeah, yeah, and I think it's a good thing too. Like I do think that a lot of people who get into things like Alpha 2s or even do early access, if you kind of know life just to that thing, I feel like you kind of lose perspective sometimes on the type of feedback that you can give. Like part of the reason I play WoW is definitely not for the PvP, because it's not great. But like going and doing like really difficult mythic bosses, or seeing how good it feels to push your buttons, like having that comparison and like jumping back and forth between the games, like that can be good to have that kind of perspective whenever you are doing that testing. So like even if I was all in on Ashes, I would still definitely make time to like try to go play things to compare it to, so that when I'm giving the feedback to the devs, it can be as kind of productive as possible as well.
Yeah,
exactly.
I like that
It's a very solid point.
Oh, hey, I think we should do a cheers, because we had a couple follow. So
oh, absolutely. All right, in 3, 2, 1, cheers.
Oh, hey, I actually have a mug. Hey, look, I was prepared, sort of.
Look,
all right,
cheers.
fantastic.
Although mine does say, let's see, I don't know if I can get it to, Mad as a Hatter.
Mad as a Hatter. Love it.
Fantastic.
Yeah, with the original Mad Hatter.
Nice. I like it. I like it. So there, Solvern was wondering, what archetype are we looking forward to testing the most?
That's a good question.
If you need a moment to think,
yeah, if one of you is ready,
we already know ours.
Yeah, we get this question all the time.
Please, by all means, give me a minute to think, because I am not prepared. That was a good question.
So I will be doing cleric / whatever. I plan to test all secondary with primary cleric, because I like to heal, and so from there I'll kind of have my idea, and it would be kind of cool during the coffee quest in the morning to kind of give you guys my opinion and things like that, because I wanted to start this before Alpha 2 came out. Then I can play a little bit on Saturday mornings with you guys live and talk about like how I'm enjoying it, things like that. I know that we would like to stream more when Alpha 2 comes out, but from my perspective, I will be doing cleric primary with all of the secondaries, and then I'll let you know what I think about the differences between them.
Yep, I'm basically going to be doing the same thing with tank. I'm going to be a tank everything. And we don't know enough about all the different archetypes and how they play together and what exactly they do for modifications and augments. So I couldn't even take a guess on which one I'm going to like most.
Yeah. I definitely like playing both tanks and healers in games, because they tend to be they can be some of the more difficult classes to play. There's always going to be a soft spot in my heart for mages, though. I will probably almost always start there. But because I like whenever you have like a really squishy class that ideally it's not overpowered, but it's got like a really unique toolbox, and like being able to use it creatively is fun. And I think mages, at least in most games, tend to end up with abilities like that you can use in creative ways. So I'd say I'm probably going to start with a mage, but very quickly, if there's one archetype or another that's got a more interesting toolbox, not even necessarily a powerful toolbox, I'm probably going to switch to that, because I'd love anytime that there's something new. I like that variety, that, things that you haven't necessarily seen in other games. So
yeah. I know we're going to be the stereotypical power couple running around, the healer with her protective tank and a tank with his pocket healer.
Yeah, it's hard to beat a pocket healer, but
it's
okay.
What we end up coming up to with the discussion the other day? You're actually going to be riding around in the backpack.
Oh, you called me your pocket healer.
Yeah, and I forget who, somebody said, yeah, there's nothing that says let's march to war like your healer in your backpack.
Yeah. And I don't know if you've seen the Demon Slayer series for anime, but it immediately reminded me of her being in the little...
Yep. Being in the back case. Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, yeah, it was you, Selvin.
That's right.
Yeah, and I see Sir Onsington here, the summoner, the bard. Summoner probably a little bit less so. I tend not to like pet classes. They tend never to be particularly interesting to me. But bard, I don't know if anybody here ever played Rift. But the bard in Rift, if you can find like footage of it and how it worked, was very interesting, because it like actually revolved around like notes and like the music and the way that it was a healer, but it like was a support healer, and was very much about buffing damage and debuffing bosses and stuff like that, and had a very interesting gameplay. So that is absolutely a possibility for something that I would play in Ashes if they kind of go down that direction with the bard.
Yeah, I'm interested in seeing how it goes, because in World of Warcraft, I normally played Holy Priest or Resto Druid, and I'm actually playing neither of those at the moment. I'm playing Balanced Druid and Elemental Shaman.
Oh, that Elemental Shaman's kind of out of left field. Like, Boom can I kind of get, but like that Elemental Shaman, yeah.
Well, it's a support class, I think, kind of.
Actually in Classic, yeah, you're right. I'm sorry, I'm thinking in retail currently, but no, you're absolutely right. Back then it was more supportive. Different? Elemental Shaman is definitely less supporty in retail. Yeah.
Okay, gotcha.
Like they're very much more a blasting DPS class, but
okay.
No, you're absolutely right. I was not thinking about back in Classic.
The Classic stuff, yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, so yeah. I'm kind of leaning towards healing / support in general. So I've also got my eye on Bard.
Yeah, by the way, I don't think we actually called it out there. Crazy, by the way, redeemed a stretch. So,
stretch.
Yeah.
Oh.
So, I can stretch my neck, I guess. I'll do that.
There you go. Well, that's basically all I can do on this guy, too, stretch the neck.
Yeah. I put my arms out and I stretch my back out a little bit, though. I end up accidentally, from coding all day, I get in a little bit of a hunch sometimes, so I'm gonna stretch the other way sometimes.
Not sure if you noticed, Sir Onsington and Solverin are gonna be running around with
yes,
bards.
With a voice changer.
Yeah.
I love it. Okay.
Everybody needs a dandelion in their life. True.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, since we're already talking about classes, I will go ahead and jump into one of our topics for today, which is about just class systems and ideas. And a few things that we had on the plate. Actually, we were talking about PvP, so I feel like this is a great way to go in. And this is from Reddit, and it's from Zippy A, from about a week ago. And they said PvP to earn for a living. is the title of their post here. And let me just share this out real quick. There we go. And they're saying, I'm not interested in PvE at all. Is there anything in AOC that would allow me to earn for a living in the game through excelling in my skills and killing other people and spending all my time in the game doing so? Hunting rich Care Bears for their stuff or cargo, mercenary business, extortion or protection from extortion, anything. And so it's kind of interesting to see from this perspective, because I've heard mostly on here a mixture or pro PvE people, but to see a pro PvP, like hardcore, like just I'm only in it for PvP, be interested and like post something, I kind of like that. And so the answer is yes, there is going to be options, you know, like mercenary guilds and things like that. But what are you guys thinking of in terms of super merc? What do you guys think of in terms of the way that Ashes is balanced as a class or as a player for PvP and PvE stuff? For me, I feel like it's heavily balanced towards PvP, and that is because it is open world and because the dungeons are also open for most of them. So I just kind of wanted to bring this up as like a topic thing. So what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely know that Ashes has a lot of content that is geared towards PvP. I mean, like you mentioned, the open dungeons, caravans, you know, there's a lot of opportunities for it. Mm-hmm. But I think, like, reading that post, it kind of sounds like somebody wants to be able to like log in and the only thing that they do is PvP. And I don't think it's really there. Mm-hmm. Like, it's not gonna be that. I don't think it's gonna be that type of game, because if you just log in, one, you're not necessarily guaranteed that where you are currently at is where the caravans are spawning or going. Mm-hmm. You know, you may not have time to go like coordinate and get into a dungeon with other people to like go PvP in that dungeon. Mm-hmm. And you could maybe go kill a handful of people if you can find them, but like it's not that you can't have the majority of your time be PvP related, but I don't think that you could like completely ignore PvE. Right. You know, like at least and that's kind of the way that post seemed to skew, is like you're going to have at least a little bit of that. Like you're going to have to contribute in some ways beyond just doing PvP. And I mean, I think that's okay. I mean, I think I'll still think you can do the vast majority of it that way. Mm-hmm. But I think that's also necessary, because if you log in as a PvE player and you're always being attacked, like then there are not going to be those quote unquote Care Bears anymore for people to feed off of. So like it does have to be a bit more of a balance, and you know there's still plenty of opportunity for them to have all the fun they want. The Open Seas actually just saw that in chat as well. Like I mean, yeah, there are tons of opportunities for it to happen. It's just not going to be a 24/7 thing. And I think if you look at other games that have failed, that have been much closer to that 24/7 PvP, you'll understand why that's not a very good way for them to build it. Right. I mean, it's just kind of my opinion on it, but I still think there's way more than enough opportunity to get your fun out of PvP.
Definitely. Yeah, I can agree with that.
Yeah, I have a feeling that there's not going to be much in the way of the merc life for a good bit of time. Maybe like the first month. Maybe after that, you know, there might be a node that's built up to like tier 3 or something, or maybe tier 4, and it can finally start, you know, having the bounty hunter stuff and start to have things worthwhile for people to go out and do, like caravans and such like that. Mm-hmm. That you can actually jump into and not gain corruption, and potentially get some experience out of raiding a caravan. I don't know how they're planning it, if they're planning on doing that or not, but.
Well, you actually make a really good point too, because like there will be a certain amount of lag time between when the game starts and when there's actually an economy. Like you're not going to have it day one. And the other thing I think is kind of funny is the way that post is worded. You know, they're talking about like, I want to feed off PvP or PvE Care Bears. It's like, chances are that's who's going to be employing you.
Yeah.
Like if you want to actually make a living, like if I don't want to PvP and I want to go out and farm, I'm hiring an army to come with me. Like, you know, like you're not going to be PvPing just random one-offs, because if they're carrying anything of value, or if they're going after anything of value, they're going to use a portion of that money to fund their PvP person.
Right.
Yeah, like it's that sort of relationship, and once it gets up and running, it will. Again, it'll still think it'll be 24/7, but like you said, like once you get that economy after that first month or 2 months or whatever that initial buildup is, there will be a lot more opportunities for it. That's where you get into guild espionage and learning where transfers and things are going to happen, and being able to kind of align so that you can take advantage of more of those opportunities.
Yeah.
So yeah, it will eventually become more rich, but you know, there's going to be that lag time, and there's going to be some effort on the part of the person who's wanting to PvP to make the connections in the PvE world to know where the content is going to be happening.
Yeah. And
yeah.
I mean, I feel like that could be an interesting part of it as well, is the whole spying on other guilds and figuring out where people are going to be. And, you know, I'm sure there might be some sort of stream sniping involved as well if people are streaming this. I saw over on so-and-so stream that like they're fighting this caravan, but I don't know if we're on the same server as they are, things like that, you know. But there's also, I think, you know, that's a great point, because while you can't do purely PvP, you also can't purely do PvE. And so it's an interesting combo of like a yin and yang almost, where it's maybe not perfect balance, but it's balanced of some sort.
Yeah, just like with crafting, you need interdependency. You cannot build a game where one can be entirely independent of the other. Otherwise, you've got people playing two separate games, and that's just not going to work. So I think they've got a pretty good balance right now.
Yeah, see, the fun thing about all that is also going to be that if they jump in from day one, there's not going to be any established PvP for all levels yet. We'll have to discover the areas that we're fighting over. We'll have to, you know, discover the arenas, create the arenas in the metropolises, that type of thing. And potentially, depending on how they decide to do it, they might even lock some of the arenas, I would think, behind some story progression.
Oh, definitely. I could definitely see that.
So
you know, like
you're going to have to do some
outdoor
PvE.
arenas and stuff.
Yeah, you're going to have to take part in some PvE to get to that PvP experience. Like, I doubt it's going to end up being a game where you can log in and from level 1 go all the way up to max level doing nothing but PvP.
Yeah, I mean, and like if you were like an arena that you had to kill some world boss to be able to unlock, your participation in that could be PvP focused. You just might be protecting the raid group trying to fight the dragon, right? Like, and take claim of whatever that is. So yeah, again, it's not that you can't necessarily interact with the world that way. It's just not going to be devoid of PvE in the way that. So I think some people, and maybe this poster of this Reddit thread was kind of insinuating, is like, I don't want to touch any of that PvE stuff. Yeah. It's like, but ultimately that PvE stuff is what's going to trigger all of the scenarios where PvP is meaningful.
Right. I mean, in order for somebody to have that stuff to drop, they're going to need a reason to go get it. And that reason to go get it is usually on the PvE side. And I also really, I mean, wanting to PvP in and of itself is the reason for PvE, because there's not going to be PvP gear versus PvE gear. There's going to just be gear. And so if you want the better gear, you need to be able to get the better gear somehow. And you're going to need to rely on somebody who uses the PvE system to go raid and get the materials to make that better gear, and then use the money that you've made doing your PvE stuff. So like, it's all going to be interdependent, like you said. And I think that's really neat. I think this is a perspective that I don't really get to think from, because I am not really pro PvP like that. I don't live and die by the sword. I prefer exploring stuff and seeing like, how hard is this dungeon, and like, what can I make, and how can I be useful with my like foods and my alchemy stuff.
Yeah, but wait. So just so we're clear here, though, if you're going to be gathering, you're definitely going to be dying by the sword.
Okay.
So
Okay.
you may not live
fine.
by the sword, but you're bound to die by the sword.
Fair.
Very true.
Fair. Sovereign says live and die by the hammer. It's more productive.
The sword.
And, you know, Saronzi just says alliances will be key to open world domination. And also Sovereign says there's a way to go about earning a good reputation versus a bad one. And, you know, you can mark yourself as purple. You can keep yourself flagged, and you should be fine because other people who are purple are free to engage with. But if you mark yourself as purple and then you kill a green and they don't fight back, you'll turn red, and then that's when the fun kind of stops for those types of people who just like going out and like either, whether they mean to or not, ganking people because they're just better geared, and like there's been people where we went up against them and they hit us once and half our health was gone almost immediately. So when engaging in PvP, it's a very fast-paced situation. Like you jump in, you do a bunch of attacks, and you jump out, and it's just like one of you is dead. Usually it's me, but it's quick. You know.
Yeah, speaking of green and red and purple.
Yes.
I have to ask everybody, was I the only one who heard those colors and thought that the purple and the red got reversed? Because the purple should be the off weird one that you're not used to seeing. Like red would be a combatant, green would be, you know, non-combatant, and then purple would be the corrupted.
Yeah, I feel like you might be used to WoW for that.
Yeah, typically I would say that like video games have a habit of putting like black and purple as your corruption colors. Like just in general, when something is corrupted, it almost always has like that hazy black purple stuff around it.
Yeah, but you know what? I thought about it though. I finally, I think it took me like 4 months to figure it out, and I finally kind of clicked. The corrupted players are basically seen as monsters to you when you're a non-combatant, and the monster names are pretty much guaranteed to be in red. So it finally clicked, and I said, "Yeah, okay, I give." It still feels weird, but I get. Okay.
That it's just that it is definitely hostile. That makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. I get that.
I associate PKing with red too. Yeah, fair. I think that's Ultima Online. Red has always been murder to me. Yeah. I think it's like just an interesting thing. It's nice to have a differentiation of like, this is somebody who's flagged, this is somebody who's not flagged, and this is somebody who's corrupted, definitely corrupted.
Yeah.
But I think it makes sense in terms of Ashes because they have that red color for their corruption. So the red matching the corruption color of the world, like the corrupted crystals are red, I believe. So I think it makes sense in that manner. But I want to continue talking about... Wait, hold on. Which one is this one? There's one that I think would be good.
All right, well, while you find that, I want to catch up on chat real quick.
Okay.
Oh, wait, no. Well, what do you got? Sounded like you were...
I already got it.
Oh,
by the way,
okay.
I do have some of the questions that you guys have been asking. I've been pinning them in a part to get to later. I'm trying to keep this kind of on topic, and then we have a random topic section for later. But as you bring up topics or comments on topic, we've been engaging almost immediately, but I've been trying to save those for later, if that's okay.
Yeah, that works for me.
Alrighty. Affliction specialist. So we're talking about corruption and PvP, and nothing says corruption and PvP to me like a rogue. So Wars TM on the forums put this conversation about any rogue may learn to use poisons, but few delve into the depths of true mastery. So a secretive sect of those with rogue training who have delved deep into the mysteries of the body, alchemy, and toxins have recently made themselves known, slaying powerful beasts by barely scratching their skin and assassinating even the most well-guarded. The reputation of the affliction specialist grows daily. And so I was kind of wondering what your thoughts were on how do I go about saying this? being able to spec into using poisons more lethally, I guess would be a word to put there. And or maybe the idea that at a smaller level, because I mean, at the end of the day, anybody could put some sort of poison on their weapons, but I don't know. I thought it would be kind of fun to entertain the idea of what do you think of anybody being able to kind of use a little bit of poison, like a light amount, versus a rogue type who could spec into a deeper, more lethal poison application.
Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say, mechanically, the only issue with that is going to be that if they make it too strong, then the rogue is going to be able to go in, do a slice, and then like flash sit for a fight and just let it kill something. So it's got to be something that they can do some slashes, and it'll put poisons on there, and it'll tick, and some will boost the effectiveness of others. So you got to combine them in clever ways, like put one kind of poison on one dagger, another on another, and then have like an extra little pokey like ice pick or something you can switch to in the middle of a fight, or like some creative stuff like that. So you can put multiple poisons out that work off of each other and maintain activity instead of just slice and woo, watch it go.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely the way the class is described is not feasible. There's literally like in the post, it's like you put up the dots and you can't cleanse them. If you do manage to cleanse them, it does damage that ignores resistance. Like you can't do that. Like that's too much. But like the idea of having somebody having one of the rogue classes or subclasses have a toolbox of poisons is what I would imagine that really should look like, right? Like if you have somebody who is a master of poisons, it's not necessarily that they have the most deadly poison, it's that they've got the right poison for every assassination.
Okay,
and
yeah. I like that.
So like if you're going to go out and you're after a fighter type, maybe you bring something that slows or reduces accuracy. If you're going after a mage, bring something that increases cast time, or something along those lines. Or if you're going to be fighting a group, maybe you can give them a poison that does a moderate amount of damage. It's not like an insane amount, but a moderate amount that's kind of like a trap poison, right? So it's like I poison the target, the healer wants to immediately remove it, but it wasn't a threat to the target that I put it on. It's a silence when they dispel it. That's actually what the point of that poison is, right? Is to silence the healer. Like being able to give them a toolkit where maybe they've got 6 or 8 poisons, but they can only ever equip 2 of them, or maybe it's through the augment system. Yeah. But kind of doing that sort of toolkit, I think, gets at this affliction specialist post in a way that would actually fit into gameplay. Yeah. While still, and it rewards you for planning ahead, which I think is something that is lacking from a lot of rogue classes in video games. Because like Vertec was talking about, a lot of times it's just pop out of stealth, blow your cooldowns, go back into stealth, and like if the target's not dead, you just wait and try again. Yeah. Versus like being rewarded for kind of coming up with the right game plan to go attack your target. Something like that might be really interesting to see.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like it might even be neat, like you were saying, equip a couple poisons at once. Maybe have another one could be just a straight dot poison that interacts as long as there's another poison effect on the target. It does extra damage, and it's targeted towards maybe specific creature types like humanoids, beasts. Amphibious,
definitely, like on the PvE
snakes,
side of
stuff
things.
like that.
Yeah, more effective against humanoids or beasts. Yeah, I like that. I do too. But I think you brought up a really good thing that I didn't even think about, which is like not like a more deadly, but a different type. And I really like that because it does bring in a little bit more of that being prepared kind of aspect to it. So maybe you notice the type of person that's off in the distance that you're ready to go engage in a fight with. And so you try to hide yourself away in a little corner and hopefully not get noticed while you apply your poisons real quick to, do the best amount of damage to the person that you're trying to fight. And I really liked that sneaky one. I mean, I say I like it, but it's like, as much as I like playing healer, I think there should be a combat, to the healer. So having something that's a trap card, if you will, by removing that poison effect and then silencing the healer is like really sneaky. And I was just like, oh, sneaky bugger about it, you know?
Yep. Yeah. I mean, anything that gets at, that idea of the rock, paper, scissors in PvP where, no one thing is infinitely better than anything else, but at least giving them tools to, hold their own, or especially within a group, contribute in a way. And I think rogues a lot of times kind of get left out in the group side of things because they tend to be a little bit squishier. But if part of what they could bring to the table is more control, then, again, it just opens up new avenues of gameplay for people. So, yeah, I mean, I definitely like the general idea of an affliction specialist, somebody who's kind of a master of poisons, but definitely much more in a toolbox kind of way as opposed to that power from the post.
Yeah. Ooh, it looks like Vertec has one here that you want to talk about from the chat.
Yeah, I was just putting in Penumbra because it's kind of the opposite point of view there. Like, as a rogue, more interested in the dungeon delving traps and hidden secrets. Poison isn't interesting to me. Just it's the exact opposite side of the spectrum, and objectively just as fun to play, I'm sure.
Oh yeah,
it's just a different aspect of the game altogether.
Honestly, I feel like I would align myself more with Penumbral on that because when going into kitty form on my druid, all I want to do is sneak through the dungeon and get to a certain part of the dungeon and then either take out like a boss or maybe like grab some herbs real quick. So take out a mob or two, grab the herbs that I need, sneak back out and go somewhere else, or unlock a lock box that you can only do as a rogue. I like that stuff too. And that I love that it leans heavy into the class kits that Steven's planning.
Yeah. And actually between that and like what you were saying a minute ago too, Vertec, like a lot of what I was just talking about is definitely a little bit more PvP focused, but yeah, like kind of thinking about it in a broader term and like thinking about PvE as well. If you're having a toolkit, it would be interesting to see what they could do with your toolkit for dungeon delving, because I'm not like, because some of that seems like it would be almost like class RP kind of stuff, right? Like, being able to do like lock picking in World of Warcraft, right? It's just like a thing you can do. It's not really part of your rogue kit. It's just kind of a thing. But I wonder if they could find a way to like actually work that into your kit so that you would actually have to do something with the traps or the secrets in some way that wasn't just I push a button and I roll a dice and see if I disable it or find it.
I kind of like the idea of leveling that up, like having where you have to have somebody, maybe a blacksmith, craft locks or whatever, and then you have to level up the skill by unlocking those things, and maybe like your thieves tools or whatever break every so often because you failed at unlocking whatever trap lock practice thing that the person made. But I don't know, I think that would be kind of cool. It's just like leveling it up because it is a skill. You do have to practice to get better at it, to know what to look for and things like that. So I'd be very interested in seeing how that works out. But Name A here, welcome in. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was gonna say that as a rogue, though, if your lockpicking tools break while you're trying to level up, you should probably just go assassinate the crafter because they just gave you a faulty product.
I love it. Hello, Ikriel. Welcome in. Skyrim did locks very well. Nice. Yeah, right. But Name A said, I feel like one of the most important parts of combat will be the player level versus mob level discrepancy. Player level should be linear, while mob level should be non-linear. A level 1 player beats one level 1 mob, but level 10 mobs need multiple level 10 players. This would make moving through the worlds in high level zones riskier for solo players and even small groups. And they said, to add on to our conversation, also poison effects should definitely be specific: beast versus elemental versus human, or slow versus stunning versus higher damage. And I like that idea where you apply a poison, but it doesn't do anything unless you keep attacking, meaning that it makes them more susceptible to damage versus just a damage ticker, which kind of helps negate that whole let me just hit them once and watch it tick off until they die eventually. But yeah, I think the mob level thing would be interesting, and I'll let you guys kind of run with that while I grab the next topic.
Yeah. Go ahead, DJ.
Oh, no,
I'll be calling you Vertex instead of DJ because I just look at your thing. Okay. So, jeez. Been a long day. The only problem with that name is that from a purely fantasy standpoint, it is a very cool thought, but as soon as you overemphasize your world into group content, then you're going to run out of people very quickly. I know it sounds counterintuitive to play an MMO solo, but the number of people who play it solo and only form temporary connections is very, very high. Actual organized groups of people actually make up a much smaller portion of people who play MMOs. And so you have to have a very careful balance there. You could definitely do that in some areas where you can make it this is definitely more for group content. But you definitely have to be careful how much of that you do, because as a solo player, especially the type of solo player who honestly funds MMOs, is the type of person who comes home after work. They might sometime during the evening, maybe 2 to 3 times a week, they've got a couple hours they can spend, maybe a little bit longer on a weekend, and they want to jump in, do some stuff. And if there's constantly things impeding their way to be able to do stuff, you just lose them so quickly. So it is a tough balance to walk. I definitely love the idea that mobs get stronger in that way, but there might be other ways to accomplish that, that same thing that's a little bit less restrictive to your solo player.
Yeah,
because the other part of that is, even if they hop on for say 3 or 4 hours, enough time to do a raid, there's no guarantee that the group that they normally play with is all going to be online and all ready to go and all trying to do the same thing. Even in a guild of sometimes that's even hard in a full guild. It's tough to do that. So
what Neme just said, I just feel like the monsters have lost their scary aspect. They used to have a dragon should always be threatening, and I want to say to that point, what point of that is the dragons lost their scary, or you became brave enough that the dragons are not scary anymore? A good example I think would be Elden Ring, where this girl, there's this random clip of this girl in that plays in my head rent free sometimes, and she sees this dragon, she's like, oh, I got this, and it just murdered her so fast, and she was like, nope, I don't got this. And it's one of those things, you're not scared of it until it makes you respectfully be scared of it. And it's because you've been playing for so long. In my mind, it's probably because you've been playing so long that you're like, oh, it's just a dragon, I got this, not a problem, but there's definitely a big difference for me personally when I'm playing with Vertex versus when I'm playing by myself. When I'm playing by myself, I play a very different style when I play with Vertex, because Vertex kills things really fast, or at least keeps their aggro so that I can kill them really fast. And then when I'm playing by myself, they're attacking me, and I understand just how weighty that thing is without him, you know. But yeah, I played Horizon Zero Dawn, but I feel like they do a really good job of making that stuff scary in a single person game aspect, like Horizon Zero Dawn, like Elden Ring. But when you bring it into an MMO where there's other people and other things like that, it's like one of those, like, yeah, I'm not going to touch you by myself, but let me try to find other people that can fight you with me so that I'm not by myself, because I know if I try to do that, you're just going to murderize me.
Yeah, So probably the best example of this that I can give is Terra. So Terra had BAMs, badass monsters, right?
Yeah.
That's the official name for them. And a BAM was a monster that you could kind of think about in other game terms as like an elite. But the difference was, if it was your level, the chances of you killing it were a lot lower if you were even level with it. But because Terra was like fully action based with like lock on targeting for some things, a BAM would have mostly telegraphed moves. Sometimes it would actually put things on the ground and you could see them, but there was like centaur creatures, for example, that had this triangle leap that they would do. They would jump forward, right, across, and then back to their original position. And the only tell for it was they would stomp their front right foot 3 times. And so you can take that kind of design and make it so that ideally, if you want to farm BAMs efficiently, you get your group together. But if you were very skilled and you could read all of those tells, you could potentially solo them, and then that gives you a tier kind of before your dragons, right? That's like your Horizon Zero Dawn tier, is like killing that T-Rex in Horizon Zero Dawn. I can do that as one person, as Aloy, with some tools and paying attention. I can do this.
Right.
Or Elden Ring, if you're the guy who can literally dodge every single ability and beat every Souls game without getting hit, which was an unbelievable achievement by that dude. Then you can do that. But then there should always be that next level up. And I don't know, this might be somewhere in our additional topic, so I won't go too far into it. But like when it comes to big mob AI, you have to be very careful, because anything beyond that BAM level of intelligence, where it's got kind of a semi-random set of things that it can do with just simple telegraphs, the game is always going to be smarter than you. It's always going to be better than you. So you have to be very careful how many tools you give to an AI like that, because it gets out of hand so quickly. But I do believe we touch on that in something else, so I won't go further than that for now. But I do think you could definitely create tiers and ashes that make things feel scary. Because I cannot tell you how much fun I had like soloing BAMs. Like I love doing them with groups and they were fun, but like going out there and knowing like if I screw up once, I'm dead. Like, but just to do it just because it was like a challenge for yourself to see if you could do. Right. Like, I hope that they do have something like that, almost like a leader of a pack of mobs. Like you got a bunch of goblins and you got like one big hobgoblin, and like anybody can kill the goblins, but the hobgoblin is meant for 3 players or 1 really good player.
Yeah. And yeah, we definitely will be talking about more of that stuff in the coming up here soon.
Yeah, I know we kind of started to touch on that topic, so I don't want to go like off the rails into that before you were ready. But like, it's definitely one of my favorite topics in games, because that whole system in Terra was one of my favorite like ways of having another tier between just like a boss mob and all the stuff you grind all the time. Yeah,
absolutely. And just as a quick side note before entering into the next topic or next part of this topic, this is going to be the major difference between Monday nights and tonight. Monday nights is free form. We can go wherever direction the conversation takes us. But for our podcast, we try to keep it a little bit organized, a little bit of organized chaos, if you will.
Herding cats.
Yeah, exactly. Kind of to that level, though, when you're fighting somebody, this next topic is on animations and how it affects your class fantasy. And no, all good. You don't have the show notes. You're fine. But I'll touch on that later. Actually, probably Monday. But Ocean Sunwind from the forum says that I noticed the fighter can wield a huge two-handed sword, but the animation for one of the fighter's attacks was a giant glowing hammer. I understand that having a huge animation gives every player visual cue as to what is happening. It'd be exceedingly powerful if the animation was small and difficult to comprehend what was happening on the battlefield. But what I'm trying to bring to light is that a giant golden two-handed sword would be great instead of the hammer. Perhaps the giant light-shaped weapon can be the weapon of the fighter is using, so that whenever a player is using that ability or stun or stagger a small group of opponents, it feels even more satisfying knowing when that you're doing it with a weapon you forged or worked hard to obtain instead of a hammer you may not be wielding. And I mean, to that point, I forgot that there was the fighter. That was a fighter ability. I thought that was a cleric ability a couple of times because it looks divine. It looks like it's a divine light or like a divine retribution kind of feeling.
Well, I don't think, I think it was intended to be, I might be misremembering, but I believe in that clip that was a weapon master is like what it was kind of intended to be, to show off what they had, like kind of like some of the thought process. So I don't think it was like just straight warrior. There was some flavor to it. Okay.
Well, the other thing about it is the ground effect that happens when it hits is a circular shaped rupture in the ground that knocks things down. So when you turn that into a sword, suddenly the actual impact on the ground wouldn't make any sense.
Yeah.
This is the problem between how real do we want things to be and how much is it just about visual communication, right? Because the thing is like that warrior was wielding a sword. Okay, well, let's change the big animation in the air then to a sword. Okay, well, now what if he's wielding a hammer? Does it change again? Because you're not tied to a specific weapon for any of the classes. So realistically then, for every single animation like that, do I have to then create 20 animations because I need one for every permutation of weapon that he could potentially be wielding at that moment when he triggers that ability? Like that sort of stuff doesn't make sense. It just becomes bloat for your game. So while yes, I think there are ways you could maybe come up with a design that was a little bit more agnostic, that maybe fit better. Like Vertek, you were saying like the impact on the ground was a circular. So maybe the thing in the air is more just a ball of energy. So that looks fine with any weapon, and then makes the impact. But again, is that ball of energy as fun? I don't know. I don't know where you draw the line. I think everybody's going to have kind of their own personal opinion on exactly where that's at. Mm-hmm. But that ultimately, that's kind of the thing is like, we're not going to get 100% connection between your class and your animations, to kind of what you would expect them to be in the real world of Era. Ideally, it's just enough that it sticks to the class fantasy well enough. And if that was a weapon master, maybe the fact that no matter what he's using, like he's a master of all of the weapons, so the hammer also makes sense. I don't know if that's actually the case or not, but yeah, it's tough because you want to also play into the things that people like, because not everybody likes big two-handed swords. So not every animation should be a big two-handed sword. Ideally, maybe they could spec into some hammer-looking abilities if that's what they wanted. I
think what that person was trying to get at was, instead of the hammer, using the weapon that you have in your hands to make it much more satisfying, because you're like, yeah, I crafted it. Look at this thing that like my character is doing with this weapon I crafted. It's so awesome,
Yeah, it get real rough though.
It's a limitation on tech. I mean, you have to, like, again, as a developer, you got to draw a line somewhere, and you just can't have infinite permutations. Trust me, I would love if that was the case. We're just not quite there yet. Yeah. So, and this goes back to like whenever we're wanting to have good conversations with devs, like this person, like what they want isn't necessarily like, maybe the end goal isn't that they have to have whatever weapon they're wielding be what is part of that animation, but maybe just that they don't want it to be so disconnected. So hopefully, like, as we're having these conversations and as people are having conversations on the forum, we don't just tell people, oh, well, that's a stupid idea, or well, they can't do that. It's okay, well, I see what you're saying, but like, what if they could at least get to this point and then help the devs maybe find some of that middle ground, because you just can't have an infinite development like that. Otherwise you become Star Citizen.
Yeah.
But also I feel like it's important as a community to engage with people as a community. So absolutely, bringing a more meaningful conversation instead of just shutting something down is always my favorite approach. I don't really like going like that. That's a dumb idea and just leaving it at that. I also don't really like when I'm offering out like a question. If somebody were to say like, I don't like that option. Okay, well, why don't you give me an option that you do like give me something to work with, but there's a lot that goes into, I think, development and choices on who has what abilities. And I was just more so, for my only piece of conversation was I felt like that hammer was more of a cleric thing to have instead of a fighter thing. And so absolutely. I would like to know where that's going to be placed later. But obviously, we're in pre-alpha 2 at the moment. We're expecting alpha 2 info coming eventually, because they gave out like the alpha 2 preview video and things like that. But I think we'll see kind of where this goes, yeah, I actually agree with what Vertec has up there. I'll let you go ahead and chat while I get the next topic ready.
Okay. Yeah, I think Penumbra kind of stumbled across what I think would be anyway, the best meeting in the middle type thing, because you figure you have to stick with the class fantasy, and the class fantasy of like a weapons master is going to be everything's based on weapons, right? So like even like a ball of energy or anything that's amorphous or what have you just wouldn't make sense. So it has to be a weapon, and it can't be any weapon you're holding, because then every single time a new weapon hits the game, they got to make a new animation for it at high res, because it's a big weapon, right? It's much bigger than the one in your hands, so they literally have to make a bigger model for it. That eats up data. That's something else your computer is going to have to store just in case you bump into a weapons master. So you're going to have all those different weapons just hanging out in your memory for no reason. And if it's the skill that landed there, I'm not sure what they could really do outside of just being able to augment and color your hammer and maybe change it a little bit, but everyone has the same options to change it, so you're eventually going to see the same kind of thing, but there's at least some variety.
And I kind of wanted to swap us into a little bit of the official Ashes topics, as well as like the tanking stuff, because obviously this month is huge for tanking conversations. And so there's a few different ways we could go about it. I just want to formally just kind of put this out there. I don't know if Vertec ever actually responded to this, because he's pro tank, but the dev discussion was talking about threat mitigation. So for people who prefer to play the tanking role due to holding threat as a prevalent part of combat, would you prefer threat mechanics to be part of combat initiation or throughout the entire duration of combat? And they actually put up a edit with a follow-up question for the non-tanking players like myself. I wonder if they watched, because I was like, I'm not a tank, so I'm not going to talk about this. But for non-tanking players, are you fond of having to play your role with threat in mind? And I'm interested in seeing what they mean by that, because when you go into PvP, threat usually has no effect when it comes to PvP. So when like threat in mind, I'm guessing they mean from the perspective of me possibly stealing threat from you. Well, I've experienced that a lot as a healer, because I mean, healer threat, that's definitely a thing. You're healing the thing that the person's trying to kill. The thing's gonna try to go after the person trying to heal, because that's the quickest source to killing the thing that they're trying to kill in the first place, be it enemy or player. So I feel like that kind of like, you naturally generate more threat as a healer or as somebody who's doing a lot of damage, because then if you're a rogue who's ganking and killing a lot of people, immediately you've got like 5 versus that one rogue because everybody's trying to take down the rogue, you know? I feel like that's the only kind of quote unquote threat that ends up in PvP. It's a natural threat, not like a system created threat.
Yeah,
Sorry.
I think they're probably talking strictly limited to PvE circumstances, because I mean that's my gripe about just threat generation in general. But literally half a tank's job means nothing in PvP because no developer works the threat generation into PvP in any meaningful way whatsoever.
Yeah.
Like I think it should, if anything else, just in PvP, it should turn into like damage reduction. Just that's it. You gain a lot of threat on somebody and they just can't do damage to anything.
Yeah.
So they're going to need to call their friends to come attack you first, and that's why you would generate aggro, so to say, with PvP people.
Yeah, I could see that.
But yeah, I did definitely respond to this. I put a lengthy response because definitely. I mean, I just mentioned it. Threat is basically half a tank's job. There's only 2 jobs that a tank needs to keep in mind at all times, and that's threat generation, boss positioning. Everything else is as needed. Kick if needed, guard your healer if needed, grab adds if needed, and those are all potentially, maybe you might need to, and then again there might also be another tank that takes care of all that, or a rogue that takes care of the interrupts or what have you. So you might be left with nothing but position the boss, do threat, the end.
Yeah.
So yeah, I've always had the idea that it should definitely be a constant battle. There should be a balance. You don't always need to hit your threat buttons at all times to keep threat. You should be able to get ahead so that you can do things like, I need to reposition the boss, so I gotta run. I can't attack it while I do that. So those ticking dots and everything are gonna pull threat from me. So what do I do? No, so that you should be able to get ahead at least a little bit so that you can focus on doing a few other things here and there. But there should be a constant worry of losing it, and DPS should have to worry about, okay, I need to wait until tank says go before I launch my nuclear weapons. Until then, I'm just using regular shotguns.
Right. I can see that.
So I want to make sure you got like all the way through your talk, because I have a very different take on this. I didn't want to start until you were.
I could talk for hours, but I'll go ahead and tap out on this. I could talk forever on the tank stuff.
Okay, so I made myself a couple of notes here because there's a couple parts of this I don't want to miss talking about. So I'm actually, while I don't always tank, I do tank in some games, but I truly believe there are no tanks and no healers in video games. Okay, there are only better and worse DPS. That's all there is. Okay, because a tank, the only thing they do is DPS and occasionally push an additional button to make sure that they hang. And I know it's more than one button, but just for simplicity, they push an additional button to hold threat, and then they push an additional button not to die. Okay, but there is a very finite point where a tank is no longer a better tank. You only ever need X amount of threat. You only ever need Y amount of mitigation. As soon as you hit that, your whole job becomes do as much damage as possible. Always. It's literally the same thing in every game. And especially if you look at very high-end content, and a healer's the exact same way, by the way. It's, I got to do X amount of healing to keep people alive. Everything else I do goes into damage, because it's about killing the thing that's trying to kill you as fast as possible, so there's the least amount of things that can go wrong.
Right.
So because of that, I think that, like, at least for me, like, I'm not saying that you can't enjoy threat and things like that, but it's not really any different than doing DPS. A threat rotation versus a DPS rotation is exactly the same gameplay loop. It's just a different combination of buttons. And whenever you have mitigations, your mitigations are no different. I'm going to use World of Warcraft as an example, just because I've been mythic raiding, so it's fresh in my brain. So within the mythic raid, you're doing a boss is about to punch the crap out of the tank pops a cooldown, we're good. All right, tank's about to, or I go out to soak a particular ability. You know, there's some shared damage thing I got to go do. As a DPS, I go stand in it. I also have damage mitigation cooldowns. So I am also a tank because I can mitigate damage.
Right.
And so like these type of gameplay things to me, they can still be interesting, but I don't think it's threat in and of itself that is actually the interesting part. I think you kind of touched on what I actually think is the interesting part, which is repositioning and battlefield control. I don't know how it would actually work in a game. Excuse me. But the idea that your DPS and your tanks are all just flavors of DPS, but your tanks have part of their toolkit around, like, you have something that like pins the boss down so he can't move. He's not able to move out of it, so he can only hit anything that's in melee with him, giving you I don't know, like an ability to be able to throw up a wall to, like especially in Ashes where you have player collision, you know, something that you can throw up to stop him from being able to charge through, you know, the healers. And this is what gets into it. You also need different kind of AI for those things, because right now the way that things work is it's just, if you have the highest threat, that's who the tank hits, or that's who the mob hits. And I don't know, I just don't think that, I don't know if you can get away from it in a game like Ashes, or what the actual answer is in an MMO, but I don't think it's threat in and of itself that is the interesting part, or what makes tanking fun. Right. Because it's just a rotation like anything else for DPS. It's
kind of like what you do with that threat.
Exactly. It's
exactly like saying like your DPS numbers are not what making, it's not what makes being a DPS fun.
Right.
But the thing is you don't know. Okay, so here, okay. So I can measure when I'm pushing my DPS buttons better. You cannot measure when you're pushing your threat buttons better.
Oh, absolutely, you can. I will go to the death on that one. Absolutely, because there are games where you have to push the right buttons at the right time, and you have to use the right skills, stack them to a certain amount so they're generating more threat. If you don't, your DPS will overtake you. You will lose control of that entire fight, and everybody wipes, and you're done. And you're a suck tank because you didn't, and it wasn't even a
but
rotation.
There's still a finite amount of threat you have to have. There's never an upper end to the amount of DPS that I can do until the boss dies. There is a finite amount of threat that you have to have, because
have you watched threat meters, like details and recounts and such? There's actual threat meters. You can build up threat to the millions. Right, you can literally have 5 times as much threat as somebody else.
But it's irrelevant though. There's a point.
You know why it's irrelevant?
The DPS can never come back and pass you.
Yeah, but that's the thing, is that's exactly what I'm talking about though, and that's why it can become interesting if it's balanced correctly. So there is a struggle to keep it, and you have to do your stuff accurately in order to maintain your threat higher than somebody else. It's the same thing as like,
but you're just DPSing at that point, right? Like you're trying to push a high.
Yeah.
Right, like that's what I'm saying though. It's like it's the same gameplay loop. I don't think it's inherently interesting in and of itself, because you're doing the exact same thing that the DPS is doing.
But the stakes are a lot bigger.
No,
it's a raid wipe versus killing the boss quicker. A raid wipe is much higher stakes.
There's DPS checks. I mean, you know, ad spawns, you got 5 seconds to kill it. The like the Aranog circles in Mythic right now in Dragonflight, like if you don't kill the ad, you wipe the raid. Like what I'm saying is, like, I think the things that are more interesting for a tank are like when you're making decisions about where you're going to put your cooldowns, how you're going to share those, where you're going to do your tank stuff. So like when you got to, like, when can you move the boss? Like when the arena is kind of randomly changing because pillars or fire pools and stuff like that are coming up, having to make a decision about where is the best place for me to move this boss. That type of control, that is interesting gameplay. It's a different type of gameplay. Whereas even if you concede that, like, okay, well, let's make the concession that threat and DPS have the same amount of interestingness, they're not different. So why do I need a copy of the same type of gameplay? I'll pull this one away. Now let's make tanks actually focus on battlefield control. Mm-hmm. That gives them a niche that doesn't exist and plays into the things that are actually very interesting.
So you're saying get rid of threat generation altogether, and it's just tank walks in, taunts it once, and has threat for the rest of the battle?
I'm saying you never have threat. I'm saying the mob, again, and this is an ideal situation. I don't know that you could actually do this. and this is what we were talking about with touching on earlier with the chat was, could you have AI? Because if you made AI too smart, it's just going to go pummel your healer non-stop until your healers are dead, and that will be the end of the fight. But if you had a big dragon whose AI brain wants to do certain things, and as a tank, your job is to interpret what it's about to do, looking at its tells, and then use your abilities to cause it to not be effective. Root it, get in its way, shield your allies, like what, stand in the way of it, whatever it is. Like your job is to counter it and be the tank. Like you want to frustrate what it's trying to do.
Okay, so I kind of see where you're going with that, and I have a question for you. Have you been in a raid in any game with a dragon where the tank died and there was only one tank? Have you seen what that dragon does? Absolute chaos. There is no predicting everything, because they could do the same exact stuff on a timer even, and you'll never know which way they're going to face, and then there's going to be a tail swipe back this way, a claw swipe over there. They're going to turn 90 degrees to the left, and then there's fire breath and stuff like. You would have to tailor the entire game around that, and every single fight would need to be highly telegraphed and very slow is the other thing, because there's no way if a giant dragon just decides to turn 90 degrees, I'm not going to be able to run fast enough to get in front of it to do anything as a tank. It's just going to be impossible. But it can turn its giant lizard body real quick. So that's where that system comes in. And
it shouldn't be able to turn any faster than what a dragon should really be able to turn. It shouldn't turn like a WoW dragon where it just goes whoop, because obviously that doesn't, like, that's not how a dragon would turn. It doesn't turn on a dime. They're big ass creatures. It should have to wing its way around a bit. But I said, I'm not saying that you could have this type of. I'm not saying this type of gameplay would work, but I think it's the thing that, like, at its core, when we're thinking about designing tanks, that the emphasis should not be on the threat. It should be on the frustrating what the mob you're fighting wants to do. Your reactions and decisions that only a tank could do in those situations. That's the type of gameplay you should emphasize, because it is truly unique to tanks. Whereas threat is just a different version of DPS. Because I don't think you can really do that much creative with it other than just making the check tighter, right? Like, that's what threat is it's just you make it tighter, you reset it, you add ads. I mean, we have all that now, but again, that's still the same thing as a DPS check.
Well, even changing, like you were saying, changing up the battleground, changing up the actual environment, that right there is something you can do for threat, because now you have to move, you have to run. DPS mages are going to be still in the back going fireball, 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 and you have to reposition. What
if as a tank you could change the battlefield as well?
And see, that'd be pretty cool.
I think that's more interesting than gaming around threat.
But I think that's also something you could only do on a certain number of fights. Kind of like, what was the dragon in WoW where you had the healers were actually the DPS? Oh, because they had to heal it back to life to win.
The green dragon and Wrath of the Lich King. I know who you're talking about. The name escapes me off the top of my head.
But there's only been one fight like that. Because it's kind of a gimmick. It's a thing you can kind of throw in. Now, if every single raid fight a tank had to run around and look for, like, where's the lever in this room? Every room has a lever. I've got to find the lever that does the thing.
No,
I've got to find the bomb that does the whatever.
What if your abilities, like, what if you had like a barrier breaking ability? So, like, if there are pillars that are coming up around the room, one of the things you can do as a tank is you can crash through them. Like, again, I'm not a game designer. But just in terms of, like, the things that you could do that are interesting, that would give a tank a character that doesn't exist today, that would be more flavorful.
I'll be honest, I like the ideas, and I would be so happy to see that come to life. I just think it would be such a drastic change. It would be either very successful or very not. If people really like it or really not.
Yeah, I mean, have you played Lost Ark at all?
During the alpha / beta, no, it was beta, and that was about it.
So, like, you don't tank endlessly whenever you're in Lost Ark. Like, you have tank characters, and they have some taunts, but mobs have abilities, and they kind of do the things that they want to do. They have telegraphs, and you can taunt to interrupt some of them, because it's like it'll start casting an ability and you can taunt it and it'll break that ability and force it to turn around and try to hit you. And you can build up stuns and stuff on it. So there are ways to build bosses that are not purely about threat, that are still very good. And I would highly recommend, like, especially because you like tanking, definitely go look at their top end raid fights and how they're designed. I think more of that design could make its way into traditional MMOs, so that the things that you get to do as a tank are more interesting than just having to focus on that. I would love more interesting things to do as a DPS, by the way. Let me also clarify that position. I love whenever I get to think about how to use one of my abilities in a creative way, as opposed to just making sure that I'm pushing my buttons as efficiently as possible. Because
oh, go ahead. Sorry.
I was almost on that sense. I was just going to say, to me, the thing that makes gaming fun is whenever you have to like make a split second decision and you make like a really good decision. Like, there's nothing that feels better than that.
Yeah, I think honestly, I like the idea of more interesting mechanics and things to deal with as a tank. More things you need to do to control an enemy, like threat drops, complete threat wipes, parts of a battle where they literally cannot be tanked, environmental changes. Like, there's a lot of different stuff that could happen for absolute sure. But I also like the threat mechanic in there. I actually enjoy that part of it. It's like chasing big DPS numbers. I mean, there's just people that's why a lot of people do DPS. They like to do a whole lot of damage. Mm-hmm. They like to contribute, and that's the way they contribute. Well, my threat generation, if it's an actual battle to keep it over the DPS, to me that is something interesting, because I need to make sure I, as you were saying, maintain control of this creature. I'm keeping control of this creature in front of me by making sure that I maintain the top bar on that threat list. And then when things need to move because the ground is crumbling away, I can run away. That thing is going to follow me, and then I can turn around and smack it in the nose again and start building up threat. And then when it goes to do like a swipe, I can kick it in the neck and it's going to interrupt it. And then I see another thing coming in and I can reach out and taunt it, and I can do those extra things because I don't need to worry about keeping threat on a super fine line. But it's still, okay, now I need to get back to doing this because I need to keep this thing pissed off. I need to keep it angry. So. Yeah,
I mean, like I said, I'm not saying that threat goes away entirely. Again, well, I take that back. If I were designing a game and was actually capable of it, I'd eliminate it. But that's me. But like, in reality, because the thing is the way that this post is worded, I think is like, I don't necessarily think that is where the focus of tank design should be. Like, you can make it important, but I definitely think you're going to have more people interested in playing it if they can do more cool things, because the gap between let's say the gap between you as a tank and Joe Bob as a tank, and then me as a DPS, if I'm an amazing DPS, you might have an interesting time trying to stay ahead of me. Joe Bob is always going to have a terrible time. And the problem is we also have to make sure that the game is balanced, because you can't tune it for the 1%. So I don't know if you could ever actually tune threat to that degree to where you could make it as fun and engaging as you would need it to be for you. And
I'm happy with it being tuned to like the top 10-15%. I'm okay with that. Like, even lower, whatever. It's just some games are absolutely bananas, and within the first 30 seconds of a fight you have 10 times the amount of threat as a DPS, and you literally can just stop pushing any threat buttons. But the problem is, if you make the tank too interesting with too many things to do and more complications, there's going to be less people playing it, because most of the reason I hear people don't want to play tank at this point is it's too much responsibility. So unless you legitimately remove threat and make tank basically a support, there'll be less people playing it.
I mean, I think to a certain degree, you're going to have to get to a point where some of that is true, right? Like, a tank has to be a bit of a support, because otherwise you're not going to have things for tanks to do in the end game. And this is actually a problem that a lot of games have, where you have your normal group is 5 or 8 people or however many is like a normal group, like for like dungeon content, for example. But whenever you go up to raid content, you lose tank slots far before you lose anything else, right? So you could potentially support more tank slots higher up if it's not all about threat. You could spread that responsibility a little bit.
Yeah.
Excuse me, just a second. I gotta step over here real quick.
I want to catch up on what chat's talking about.
I was just about to say we should probably go ahead and move on because we talked about tanks forever there.
Yeah, it's okay. So I just want to first and foremost say this is the exact reason why we bring guests on. For those of you that don't know, we initially were the party of 5. And the point of party of 5 was getting opposing opinions and viewpoints for what you just saw, for that exact reason. Without ever seeing a different perspective or hearing a different perspective, you don't really expand your thoughts and your opinions and things like that. So while some of you may agree or disagree with Farazan, I think it's important that Farazan has the ability to say, your mind, as well as Vertec has the ability to say your mind. I'm over here silent because I don't know much of anything that's going on here. So yeah. I'm just like listening and enjoying the conversation. But a lot of what chat is saying is without threat, it's a wipe in less than 1 minute. Going back to what Vertec was talking about with the dragon, if the tank dies with the dragon raid, the dragon basically wipes everybody in like less than a minute.
Definitely look at Lost Ark for that. Like, I would highly recommend, if you've never seen the top end raids for that, look at how their fight design is and how complex it can be without having traditional Trinity. Like, you technically have it, and you have tank healer support, really, not or tank DPS and support, but kind of look at that for how that is, because that's actually not entirely true with the wiping that quickly.
Okay. And then Penumbral says abilities and magic overwrite any mega AIs need to desire to kill healers. That's what taunts are. And then Rallis Tech says you're trying to make tank support, and I'm pulling that out because there's another point later on where that kind of maps back to that topic or that comment. Penumbral says tanks have more armor and the need to use their armor to be the target of damage. Trinity's tank healer DPS, the wheel doesn't need to be redesigned. And then Sulverin says it sounds to me it's more like in terms of role expansion. And then I posted a link, by the way, for Theory Forge's conversation on is the need for a traditional tank threat. What was it? A sign of poor AI. So if you guys want to go check that out, that's the link is up there. I can post it again if you need. But then Silverin says, I think both are viable because Farazan described the tank's role in PvP. They who control the field. No reason they can't do it in PvE either. And Penumbral says, again, Anchor Hell from Log Horizon, tanks in PvP can have skills that generally forces or takes damage players or AI to attack them. And I think there's a lot that, is capable with tank. And I think a lot of it, honestly, will come down to your secondary archetype, where you're going. Because I imagine something like a tank bard being more of a support tank based class, and something like a tank fighter being more of a get all the threat, do all the damage, keep its attention on you. And I feel like there's room for both, but it depends on how they deal with the secondary archetypes and how that augments your primary archetypes and things like that. And I mean, again, some of this stuff probably way too fantastical for this game in terms of the development and where we're going. And like you said, we don't want another Star Citizen that's never coming out.
Yeah. And actually, I guess to clarify part of that point too is like, I definitely don't expect Ashes to go against the Trinity because they've already got it built into what they have.
Right.
But I do think taking a look at why people have an issue with the Trinity as it exists today is very important, especially when you have 64 classes.
Yeah.
So you're going to have an awful lot of variations on tank, and to Vertex's point about like, okay, if let's say you find threat interesting, well, if you're the type of tank who doesn't, maybe you want active mitigation. So like, like in Rift, there was a rogue tank and you spent all of your time basically building up a bubble to take the hit. Like giving people different ways of kind of doing that same job and expanding it. Yeah, it kind of gets into a little bit of a support category. That's kind of what tanks and healers are anyway. Like they have a primary job, but ultimately it's support. And this is true for DPS, I would just hate for Ashes to just look at the state of MMOs and where they're at and not take advantage of the fact that they're a hybrid system and can do more interesting things, even if they can't hit some of the moonshot ideas I was just like spitting out right there.
Yeah.
At least taking that concept and saying, okay, well, we can't do that, but can we give some of the tanks more battlefield control and have a naturally higher threat? Because that's what this particular tank is going to do versus this tank over here, is a lot more focused in these other type of things. So, right, and pretty much I do want to touch on that as well. And I know we're at 8:30, and I've got time, but I do want to touch on just this last thing. Yes, you're not going to have 64 classes, but you do need 64 flavors. Right. And Baskin Robbins would go out of business real fast if their 64 flavors were all basically just shades of vanilla. So yes, it is 8, but they're going to have to make sure that those augments have some meaningful gameplay feelings change. Otherwise, you're going to be in really bad situation really quickly. So that's what I'm saying, is like being able to have these different flavors of the same thing and being able to not just have tank be all about threat, but maybe give a couple of different flavors of it, I think is what's going to be important.
Yeah, I agree. I was just going to also kind of just leave this out there because again, we some of these things, I'm definitely taking note of them. We have something called featured chat where we kind of save topics. By the way, if you guys want us to see your question, in case you're worried about us missing it or whatever, you can always choose the redeem highlight my message and I'll automatically put it in featured chat for us. And it's really nice. It's really helpful because then I don't have to scroll back through everybody's chats and find the thing that somebody wanted to ask. So there you go. Something definitely helpful and useful for using your channel points with. But I wanted to put this tank checks and threat amenity conversation out there. We will probably be going more into this on Monday, just for time's sake. But it's something that I think is an interesting process of going about taking and having a different kind of check instead of always like the tank swaps and like the, hit it once with your threat and leave it kind of thing. But going into the random questions section, and you said you had time. Vertec, did you have a time in mind that you want to extend this, just to be mindful?
We could totally do a speed run through those. What was it? We have like 6 questions, or 6 things to address. Yeah. Speed round. You got 30 seconds.
Oh, good Lord. Okay. Just real quick, thanks to chat as well for the great conversation there on the tank stuff. I'm not, obviously, absolutely. I'm not developing the game, so I have no say in it. Just how I view it. So thank you for the wonderful conversation. And you too as well, Vertec. That was a lot of fun. All right, on to the speed round. 30-second answers.
I get super hyper when it comes to talking tank stuff, so I get super into it.
I love game design.
Yeah. No, definitely. And I feel like that's what the Tavern talks are more geared towards us as well, is just being able to have that freedom of just getting off on a tangent. So Sir Huntington says, is there any news updates? Ooh, very nice. Very nice.
So even in my spare time.
Is there any news updated on proximity chat and Ashes yet? And I linked a link to the wiki. I will link it again. And at the moment, I don't think that there's much of a change, but that also depends on when you last were keeping track of that. So hard for me to answer, but there's the wiki.
Yeah, this one's fairly dry and quick and easy to go over. I put one in there for the voice communication specifically.
Yeah.
VoIP is going to be available in a whole bunch of different places. Proximity based is going to be... Yeah, is going to be maybe... Proximity based is maybe based on testing for taverns, marketplaces, dungeons, and points of interest.
Mhm.
But that's still a maybe based on testing. There's no concrete, yes, we're doing this.
So
Yeah.
now
And that's true for group content as well, right?
I
For
think so.
Because I don't know if it's
regular
it's a
void.
guarantee.
I think
Yeah.
they said it's going to be like TeamSpeak powered inside the game.
Yeah, but like if you join a group, like it'll auto put you together.
In a voice.
Like if you do like a
call.
dungeon or a raid.
I think so.
I think is what they
Yeah.
said. Yeah, that was still on the
That
table.
would be kind of neat though, just because I don't know how many times you've pugged with somebody, but then like I wish I could just tell you verbally what I want to tell you.
Oh yeah, or constantly spamming a Discord link just
Yeah.
over and over to people. Yeah.
So Penumbral asks, have you decided what race you will play, and have you decided where on the map you will start or live? I
That's
think
first-
Vertex and mine are obvious.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't. Race isn't one of those things that I put a lot of value in. I don't guess. Like, it'll honestly probably just depend on like when I'm in Alpha 2 or maybe in one of the betas, and like I just find a set of armor I really dig on the character. That's usually how I end up picking race. And then as far as place to start, unless it's unreasonably hard to do, I'd like to start somewhere kind of like tundra-y, like sparse forest and snow. But I don't know if that'll be possible. But that'll probably be where I end up pretty quickly because I like that kind of environment.
I'm very nature oriented. I'm obviously going to be a pyre. I am going to be making a dwarf though for the Dunehold Guild because I told them I would. But it kind of depends on where my guild is for the most part, but in my head, in the forest.
Yeah, and I'm kind of the same way. I don't know if our guild has specific plans on saying, hey, this is where the guild is going to start, but I kind of like the idea of the guild going through the portal at the same time and arriving at the same place with a goal in mind and all. So I kind of like just the feeling of that. So I would like that. And then afterwards, I mean, I'm going to be Vec. Just saying, have you seen this face? But I want to make a secondary character that's going to be Vec, so I can go through the official Vec starting place and go through the story from that point forward.
The next
I don't think I'd be the monster race though. Do either one of you have any inkling on like whether you play the monster race? Yeah,
I will
Not
at some
really.
point.
Yeah.
I'll be a big old lion.
Just not really my thing. But I was just kind of curious if either one of you had like maybe that'd be like an alt somewhere.
Yeah. Speaking of alt, Snuckers asks, how do you create a need of other people in Artisan when people can just make alts? And my quick answer is the time dedication that's necessary for it.
I believe there's also limitations on how many things you can master per server. So you can have alts, but I do think there's additional caps on the other characters. From at least that's something that they've talked about. Whether it ends up in the final game or not, we'll see. But like I think that would be reasonable with the way that they're setting up the economy.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, and that's really what Chibi said is pretty much what I was going to say, is you could totally make an alt and you could totally have your alt do your stuff, but do you really want to double up your time on crafting, or do you want to have one crafter or only two crafters instead of having like 4 crafters or 6 crafters to do all the crafting, or just work with somebody else?
Because there's also the whole the different specializations and how far into those specializations you go that unlock specific things. So if you're a master tailor, then you can do things, but if you don't go master tailor, then you can't do those things. So and it's also like, well, sure, make the alt if you want, but is that recipe also widely available, or is that a like kind of rare-ish drop? So it's like, lots of things that kind of play into that. But that's a good question. And then another one from Snuckers. Quick question, out of topic. Do you think that airstrike ability effect, those branches on the ground, looks much better than all fighter abilities that Intrepid has shown?
Yeah.
Which ability?
That's my 30 seconds answer. Yep.
The one with the ranger where he shoots the thing and he does like a little flip in the air as he shoots it and then lands a little ways away, kind of like a mage blink mixed with an archer. Do you think that
Oh.
looks better than the fighter? Is what I believe the question was.
Short answer, yes, but also it's kind of just the same animation from D4. So, like, the D4 animation's been out a hot minute, so I'm not saying it was copied. It was definitely heavily inspired by. So, at least the other one was more unique.
Yeah. And then finally, the last question we have here in the queue is threat only in AOC like taunt and ESO?
I have not played ESO, so I can't speak to that. I think that's another one of those, like, where they took the Trinity and kicked it to the can, right?
To a certain extent, yeah.
I haven't played it so much either.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of ways. Like the way that it's intended to work currently in AOC, at least from where they're starting, is it works like a traditional MMO. That tanks just have threat multipliers on some or all of their abilities. So it would work very similarly currently to like Final Fantasy or World of Warcraft. And the conversation this month is about whether or not, or how far to deviate from that. What other considerations should they have? Those sorts of things.
Actually,
and
let me go back and grab, because I believe this is something we talked about last week where somebody asked, what is threat? And I want to grab that link and I want to put that out there again, just for anybody who may be not familiar with it.
Well, I can give a 30-second speech on that one. The threat is kind of like a hidden stat in most games. It just exists. There might be like a little bar on top of a character or something in MMOs where the tank needs to do a whole bunch of stuff, and there's threat multipliers, so they may only do 100 DPS, but their threat multiplier says they get 1,000 threat out of that. And a DPS character does 500 DPS, but theirs is a 1-to-1, so they get 500 threat. So your goal as a tank is to have the most threat. That way you can reposition as needed without having to worry about somebody taking it from you. And if you have a mage that just goes insane to begin with, they're going to top the threat meter and the boss is going to go to them and eat them for lunch. Taunt, what that does is varies between different games. Some of them it adds a certain amount of threat. Some of them it will add a certain amount of threat and pull the creature's attention for a certain amount of time. And in other games it puts you equal to the person with the most threat on the threat table. And then you have to keep generating threat in order to keep it.
I have a one sentence kind of example of it. It's like if you're trying to initialize a fight with somebody, and you can taunt them by saying a yo mama joke, or you can taunt them by an actual better taunt that will actually get them to interact with you. So that's kind of like, the taunt there. And then the threat is like, how much more is that person going to focus on fighting you versus one of your friends who's talking shit beside you? I feel like that's a good real world example of threat.
I think so.
But I posted a link. This is actually somebody else had the same question, not necessarily like the same question, but like, what is threat? It's a new concept to that person. And so they made a whole separate side thread. And I really like it because, we have to remember, not everybody is from an MMO background. Not everybody is from some sort of RPG background. Some people are from first-person shooters. There's not really threat, I don't think.
Not everybody has this gray going on like right here that's been around since time immemorial playing MMO video games. Yes.
You know what? That is a perfect segue to the last thing I wanted to share, which is a part of our community focus. And it was this meme that I came across. Hold on. So some of you that know Ninja Turtles will get this meme from that perspective. But it's, I guess, the guy that... I say I guess because I've never actually watched it. Don't shoot me. But the guy that kind of trains them all. So it's the guy that trains them all. Splinter? Okay.
Splinter.
Says, golden age of MMORPGs, baby boomer, generation X, and then he's holding hands with all the little tiny turtles, and like there's millennials on one side and zoomers on the other. And then at the bottom it shows the turtles like all grown up and taller than him, and it basically is showing like Ashes of Creation in the middle. So it's kind of like bringing them together, like the people that were like, here, I'll show you how to do MMORPGs, and now like it's the babies all grown up to play, like from playing MMORPGs and coming into Ashes being like, yeah, we'll take care of you too, So I liked it. It's very much full circle because I think Ashes is probably more geared towards people who are of the older MMO generation.
I'm just really impressed that this guy and his wife are in their 70s still playing.
Right, I liked that too. That was the other reason why I wanted to bring it up, because at the top, it was saying that, you know, they'd been playing for a very long time. They're looking forward to playing Ashes in their 70s, and I was just like, that's so adorable. I love it.
That will be me.
Yeah. And then finally, I just wanted to say I really liked the cosmetics, but we can get into the cosmetics next week.
Yeah.
As we are running out of time.
Yeah, we just used up all the time. We got talking about tanks and times it disappeared. I'm telling you, I can do it for days.
That's the thing too, is like anybody here, definitely go post on the forums like the things you enjoy about tanking, because like the more varied opinions they see, the better those tank classes are going to be. All classes, really.
Absolutely.
The more things that they can take into consideration, the better. So yeah,
honestly, that's something I've said since the beginning of our podcast, is if you don't have an Alpha 1 key, you can still contribute to the game by giving your opinions and your thoughts and reacting to other people's opinions and thoughts in a positive manner and a helpful manner. I only accentuate that because that does actually give them a lot better info to go off of, instead of like, I have this idea and somebody else being like, that's dumb. Like, okay, well, but why is that dumb to you? Because maybe to the devs it's not dumb, so like elaborate. I don't know.
Yeah, and it's so sweet that it doesn't matter if you know what makes a tank good. What matters is if you like playing tank, what makes it fun.
Yes,
what makes it interesting.
That's the important part. Yes, constructive criticism. Thank you, Basil. But yes, no, definitely.
They'll figure out the technicals.
Definitely what Farazan just said. It's okay if you don't know what makes a good one. What matters to them is what makes it enjoyable to you. If you enjoyed the tank, you can even be like, I don't have very much experience tanking except for a New World, but I enjoyed this, and then you can put that forward, and that gives them something to think about. And if you haven't watched, I'm sorry, long breath here. If you haven't watched the last live stream, when they're talking with the combat team, even they bring up World of Warcraft and other games that they've played, that they enjoyed aspects of that. So like they are definitely open to hearing what you like from other games. I mean, after all, Steven loves Arcade and Lineage and things like that. So yeah. And yeah, okay, so you got that with Sovereign. Before we wrap up, 30-second answer. Final thoughts or today's takeaway from today's episode? The thing you're taking away from this?
Definitely just that there's a lot of room for interesting design in these new games that are coming out. I mean, we've seen it from a lot of the ones that are still on the horizon as well. And so to make Ashes as competitive and as fun for us as we can, we just have to get as many opinions together and not, like you said, build a community and just let Intrepid know as much as we can.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah, basically kind of the same. Like we disagree, Farazan and I, on the threat thing, but that's perfectly fine. Like that's the only way that new things come about, is by people talking, and then eventually there's somebody who hears both sides and goes, you know what, I'm going to do this. And they do this.
That's me, just sitting and listening to both sides.
This is it's kind of like a Tavern Talks topic that could be there. It's literally listening to everybody and gathering opinions, and don't be fussy when somebody else has a different one.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's entirely fine to have people with different opinions. Like you don't have to agree on everything. Just
absolutely.
Be respectful.
I get bored when people agree with everything. Some of the most interesting for me episodes are when somebody has a different opinion than me, even just slightly. Because it gives me a different perspective to think about. I'm like, honestly, that might be better. I don't know. But yeah, my favorite takeaway from today is that there is a lot available to the welcome in. There's a lot available to the game progression and the systems that they're designing, and hopefully some of the things that we talked about will be of interest to them in the future, like with the different poisons, and instead of it being a dot, it does different things depending on the poison and the situation. And I like that idea a lot more. And I feel like it adds to the usage of it instead of just being a generic use. So yeah, changed my mind on that one a little bit. But I wanted to say as a wrap up before Vertec gets into the actual ending dialogue, Ham on Games, who is now here, welcome in, has been wonderfully helping us getting caught up, and has actually solved the problem that we were facing with our videos, where we were trying to render them and we don't know what happened, but whenever we had it before it rendered, it was fine. After we render it, the video and audio would get desynced like by a good bit, and we didn't know how to fix it, and we weren't sure what to happen, like what had happened with that. And Ham uses a different thing than we do, and there's very little desyncing happening there. So thanks to Ham, we have about 10 or so episodes that are going to be getting pumped out here pretty soon. So keep an eye out on that as we progress to get caught up. We hit a little bit of a snag, but we got it figured out, and we're working on getting all caught up by the beginning of February.
I blame it on Vertec. That guy just didn't know what he was doing when he took over the streaming part, and he just jacked it all up. One of these days I'm gonna fire him.
We'll work for protein. Send meat. Okay, Will do. I'll get you a meat subscription service that just delivers meat to your door.
There you go.
How about that?
Get some Horizon sent to your door.
There you go. Ooh. We have, let's see, we have a Jamie Chaos. We have a tech deck.
Yes, they're probably doing the Tangents of Creation over there. Anybody have preference? Some Lost Ark or some more Ashes Talking? I'm guessing more Ashes Talking.
Probably. And I'll just go ahead and get that one ready.
Yeah, just cue that up. But yeah, thank you everybody for stopping in. Thank you for spending your time here. Thank you for your words of conversation, questions, and all of that. We love it. We love it. We love it. Love that you're here and enjoying yourself in the conversation with us. You could have been doing anything at all, going out and watching Ninja Turtles instead of looking at memes of them. But you spent your time here and you saw the sign on the door. We don't give refunds because we can't. You don't get it back. So we appreciate you and are so happy you have joined us.
And we'll see you tomorrow, Sunday and Monday for more Ashes Talk.
Yeah. Have a great day.